I'm willing to look the other way about the whole Adobe thing, as long as you keep my presence about it entirely secret.
I don't know, man. When you cyber through me, it really cyber hurt.
That was also 2 seconds after you threw the first punch.
Hey, I thought it was a cop's job to de-escalate the situation.
For fuck's sakes. Will this make us even?
A burger? How could I stay mad at you, even if you are stalking me? Now get the hell out of here. I don't want to be seen with a pig.
Nihilistic nerd. Nearly immediately upon their arrival to Drogtown, we lost contact with the Sojin. This was approximately 12 days ago. The contact goes by the alias The Roach. We need you to find him and extract him and/or his assets. Bonus depends on the status of the Sojin. Your drug location is 3 miles east of Drugtown. Make your way to the western entrance of the city and contact us ASAP.
I won't lie to you. I'm a little bit of a pansy. Sure, I'll occasionally engage in horror content, or I can listen to horror stories on YouTube to help myself sleep, because witches and werewolves are far less upsetting than not knowing what happens when I die.
Stop right there, criminal scum!
Horror games, on the other hand, specifically survival horror, I just never really got into them. That is, until I tried Crow Country, an indie title that launched May of this year. Crow Country was made by SFB Games, formerly known as the Super Flash Bros, which I recognize from my days on Newgrounds. Since then, they've devved multiple games for PC, mobile, and of course, console. Yeah, these are actually the guys that made Snipper Clips. Like Snipper Clips, a lot of their games are smaller artistic experiences, stuff that I'm not too interested in. But Crow Country seems to be a departure from that more casual game design to something that real gamers would play. So let's dive into this retro survival horror game that totally didn't make me shit myself during my playthrough. Crow Country opens with the number 2024 at the center of the screen. Then it proceeds to drop. The year is now 1990, the beginning of the greatest era in American history, the era that saw console gaming evolve from 2D to 3D. The era where anime was only indulged in by losers and weirdos instead of annoying normies. And most importantly, the decade my narcissistic ass was born. Truly, these were better times. Let's start with the basics. Using the D-pad, we'll have Mara control in a classic tank style. However, if the player decides to use the left analog stick, she will control in a more conventional style. As the player experiments with the controls, they'll realize that right bumper, or R1, is the aim button. However, if that player has any situational awareness, they will notice that there is no ammo within the gun. The right analog stick moves the camera. The camera moves in a full 360 degrees around Mara. Exploring this area, players will find a missing persons report, which they can view by pressing A. This explains why Mara is here. That is to find some geezer. Now, north of the car is a gate that is locked. Interacting with it will tell the player to grab some ammo from the trunk of Mara's car. Mara's trunk has unlimited pistol ammo. After grabbing the ammo and loading the gun by holding down the right bumper and pressing A, the player will need to shoot the lock. This is accomplished by once again holding down the right bumper and aiming with the left stick or D-pad, then shooting the gun with the B button. Finally, the player can check their inventory with the left bumper. Congratulations, these are the bare essentials for controlling Mara. Entering the next area, the player is welcomed with a distorted theme park tune. This enhances the already unnerving atmosphere that is encroaching upon the player. There's a bunch of junk littered on the ground, namely a flashlight and a diagram of the controls. The player can also have Mara go dumpster diving. This action, more often than not, will provide the player with some sort of ammo or first aid kit. Moving forward, we enter what is called Crow Country on the map. I'm gonna call it the Central Square, since this area is pretty central in traversing the world of Crow Country. Also, the whole theme park is called Crow Country, so yeah. Continuing to Fairy Tale Town, tensions start to escalate. The first thing of note is the unpowered green fairy that we can switch on via the nearby code inputting device. But we don't have a code. With no other options available, the player continues forward to find a man who appears to be injured. This is Arthur Mole. He's a photographer who was injured whilst trying to get a picture of the things. Fun fact, Arthur Mole is the name of a World War I photographer who became famous for his series of living photographs. These photographs involved thousands of soldiers lining up to form some sort of collage or some shit. From the ground perspective, it would look just like a sausage fest. But if you were to take the photo from a specific angle, it would look cool. If I had to guess, Arthur Mole might be a sneaky reference, since the game has such a heavy emphasis on the player properly positioning the camera, whether for puzzles, searching for secrets, or combat itself. Moving on, Mara can give Arthur a first aid kit, then carry him back to her car, which she'll have to do because he leaves a very important note. This note has the code required to power up the ferry. Why did he have it? I don't know. Maybe he was just sitting on it. After the deed is done, it is revealed that the ferry needs a passphrase to allow the player to continue. At this time, we are not privy to this information. So, Mara continues snooping around until she finds the utility corridor. Here, things take a turn for the worse, as the music switches into a frantic wailing horn. Two bloodied bodies approach Mara, moaning in pain, or ecstasy, depending on what you're into. Shooting the enemies in the head is the best option here, as it consumes far less ammunition. However, actually doing this consistently is easier said than done. I won't lie, the combat is clunky, and that is intended. From what I can tell, the best option here would be to use the tank controls, as it makes it possible to back up whilst aiming and shooting. Unfortunately, it took me until late game to realize this, and by then I hadn't really mastered the controls, making it much harder to perform, especially when the deadlier enemies appeared. So after killing these weirdos, Mara finds Crow's Lounge. Here, the music shifts into a much more calm yet somber tone. The fireplace allows the player to save their game. There will be a trend of a controlled fire indicating a save location throughout this game. Also in this area is a note. This note has the passphrase required to get past the green fairy. Unfortunately, this is one of those games where a lot of context and story is relayed through notes left on the ground. As I've stated in previous videos, I think that this is a piss-poor way to convey a story. However, it goes with the territory of the genre, I suppose, since there aren't really many NPCs in survival horror games to help progress the plot. Also of note is the green notebook. Every save room will have one. It's a collection of all the notes the player has found throughout their journey.
Oh, thank God, another survivor.
Yeah.
Are you killing the zombies for fun?
Zombies?
Yeah, bro, whole area. You haven't noticed the place is littered with them?
Yeah, Their incessant moaning reminded me of Taylor Swift.
So you started killing them.
Who are you to tell me who or what I can or cannot kill? Unless you happen to be Roach, I don't give a shit about what you say.
Lenny sent you?
Well, that's convenient. Yes, Lenny sent me, and you can stop this pathetic attempt at patronizing me. Because you sell drugs to kids, so you can get the fuck off your high horse. The name's Nerd. Not that it matters. Let's call evac and get this over with.
If only it was that easy. We're in a dead zone, and the only connection in this shithole is 5G, which I've completely disabled.
Well, you kinda shot yourself in the foot there, didn't you?
No, I lost my phone right before I got here. Anyway, it's the 5G.
What?
It's the 5G, nerd. It transformed these people into zombies.
What?
Verizon installed an experimental version of 5G in this village to test prolonged exposure to the 5G waves. These are the results.
So are we gonna have to do some survival horror shit?
I've already done most of that. All we have to do is get to the 4G tower, turn it back on, and request evac.
Sounds like a plan. The gameplay loop of Crow Country is pretty standard when it comes to survival horror, and it doesn't do anything substantially better than any of the other games I've seen within the genre. I'm definitely not an expert in this area by any means, so feel free to call me out on my bullshit in the comments below. There is one mechanic that certainly does stand out though. When I first saw the screenshots of Crow Country, I was thinking it would play like the survival horror of yesteryear. You know, the fixed camera angle, where each room is its own claustrophobic nightmare. A very PlayStation 1 take on survival horror, if you catch my drift. Crow Country certainly looks the part, but the devs added a modern twist by adding the fully rotatable camera I mentioned earlier. This choice sacrifices the more angled and dynamic shots seen in games like Parasite Eve and Resident Evil, and therefore some of the horror aspects of those games goes out the window too. What this choice does is make maneuverability and the ability to react much smoother than those games. Whether this is a positive or a negative remains up to the player. I see it as a positive. That being said, the escalation of difficulty was somewhat lacking. Aside from the larger, deadlier enemies that start appearing as the game progresses, the devs also threw in more traps. Some traps can be used against enemies, while others are there just to sap health from the player. Around the halfway mark, new traps start popping up, and they really don't make the gameplay any better. They just make it more annoying. Moving on to the actual combat of Crow Country, it isn't very difficult. Most of the enemies go down in 3 to 4 headshots. So what the game really comes down to, at the end of the day, is puzzle solving and resource management. Playing smart will take the player far, as there are tons of environmental kill opportunities within this game. A smart player will use them as frequently as possible, as they tend to be the safer option and serve as a reduction to ammo waste. Awareness is a huge boon here, as traps are just as hazardous to Mara as they are to enemies. The puzzles themselves are not particularly difficult. Most of the puzzles can be solved with contextual clues, or will have a note somewhere throughout the park that is either a riddle associated with it, or just a flat-out answer. Again, not a fan of this kind of thing, but there is enough variety to keep players invested, as well as a pretty decent consistency of quality. Except for the Mushroom Man puzzle. This requires players to eat 4 mushrooms, 2 of which are poisonous, but you still have to eat all of them. The puzzle is making sure your health isn't too low when you eat the poison ones. But that's a bad example. A puzzle that didn't completely suck would be the train riddle. And no, this isn't because I'm autistic, it's because it's actually a real puzzle. Players will find the train room early in the game, but only get access to it late in the game. This puzzle tasks the players with rebuilding a specific train. Easier said than done, since the player will have to identify the train parts given the contextual clues within the room. But the reward is well worth it, since it's a flamethrower, and that's cool as hell. Or hot as hell, I guess. Oh, speaking of weapons, Mara has a pretty small but effective arsenal available to her. Aside from the basic pistol, Mara will have access to plenty of grenades, which are good at taking down grouped enemies.
Multi-kill.
A shotgun, a magnum, and the previously mentioned flamethrower. All of these weapons have a couple upgrades. The upgrades generally consist of damage increases, laser sights, or larger ammo capacity. The graphics for Crow Country are actually what perked my interest in this game. To me, it looks like Final Fantasy VII had an affair with Resident Evil. The characters are blocky, even by that era standard, but that's fine because it's literally what the game was going for, and it makes up by having such a beautiful level design. I was shocked when I found out that this stuff was actually 3D because it looks so similar to the 2.5D games of that era. The use of filters also helps mimic the feeling of playing on a CRT. The graphics are certainly a high point, but so is the music. Crow Country's OST was created by Ackroyd. Yes, that's right, the same Ackroyd who made Nerds Can Never Love, the Flash animation that personally called me out as a loser more than a decade ago. Well, he also happened to have made a killer soundtrack for this game. A lot of the tracks are very ambient or atmospheric. Take the Central Square theme that's heard when you first arrive there at the beginning of the game. It's got this eerie vibe to it, but it's also got a sort of a nostalgia to it as well. While there are a lot more of those ambient tunes, Crow Country also has solid, non-ambient music. Two that stood out to me were the Detective Harrison's theme. It's got this kind of like janky, goofy, spooky sound, but it sounds familiar and safe. It feels like a reprieve from the ongoing chaos. The final track that I'll mention is my favorite in the entire game. This particular track is the lead up to the final part of the game. Beyond Redemption is the culmination of the game manifested into music. Much like that, it has a huge build-up. It plays as Mara descends a massive ladder to face her destiny, and it is intense. I've got to give huge props to the art and music team. They both managed to emulate the styles of the era and blend them together perfectly. And of course, as I just mentioned, its superb soundtrack. Before I give my final thoughts on the game, I want to once again emphasize that I am not a fan of horror games, and I have seldom played them. Whether that makes me an unqualified critic or it provides a unique perspective from an outsider remains for you to decide. At the end of the day, Crow Country is a really fun game. The gameplay wasn't what I was used to, but it's still easy enough to pick up and enjoy without too much struggling. It also has a good amount of replay value, given the ranking system that rates the player's performance at the end of the game. Not to mention the host of new content that becomes available after the first run. The gameplay footage I've been using in this video is actually my second run of the game, since not only did I lose the footage of my original playthrough, I ranked B upon completion, which sounds great, until you realize that B is the worst rank. As always, there's a link to the Steam page for the game in the description below. Thank you for watching.
Okay. Once I activate the tower, all the zombies are going to be attracted to it. We'll have to hunker down and wait out the storm. It's a good thing we spent the last 6 hours setting up all these traps.
Cool, yeah, I'm gonna call evac now. Hey, this is Nerd. I've secured the assets. I'd like to request evac.
Location.
Sure, let me check the coordinates. Alright, they are 18.3002 degrees north, 64.8252 degrees west.
ETA is 45 minutes.
It's gonna be about an hour. Dude, this is boring. I haven't shot a single zombie in the past 30 minutes. The only zombie in the area is that one over there, and he just keeps walking back and forth. You know what? I'm gonna shoot it.
Nerd, calm your bloodlust. We don't...
Did you see that? His head exploded like... Wow, that was something else. I can't believe I ran up the shin of a 2-story tall H.R. Geiger-styled zombie super mutant and proceeded to cut off one of its 5 testicles.
Did you see that part when I shot it in the eye with a shotgun?
Which one? There were like 1,000.
The big one.
That doesn't help at all.